feel like most people, they get that like, literally feels like you hit puberty the first like 5 weeks. And then after that, what's up guys, Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we are going to be talking about how does testosterone feel. So this is going to be sort of rounding out my series on how does blank feel. So different anabolic androgenic steroids. Testosterone, not technically a anabolic androgenic steroid. It is the base androgen that a lot of these synthetic anabolics are derived from, however, and it is the parent of the family tree at the top, and all of these synthetic derivatives are from there. So even though testosterone derivatives are derived from testosterone, the DHT derivatives, as well as the 19-NORs, are all technically derived from testosterone as well, just with a bit more chemical modification. Because essentially, you take the 5-alpha reduced metabolite of testosterone, DHT, and then from there you tweak that to make the DHT derivatives. 19-NOR testosterone is also an intermediary in the biosynthesis of estrogens in the body, and that is a bioidentical compound that comes as a root of the cholesterol steroidogenesis pathway as well. And that is based on the chemical structure of testosterone, just with a bit of chemical alterations as well. And then the 19-NORs are derivatives of that base 19-NOR testosterone molecule. So anyways, as far as testosterone and how it feels, honestly, it's pretty broad spectrum. It's almost like when you first start it, it feels like hitting puberty again. Like it's like you just fucking hit, like whatever age you hit puberty, it's like you did it again. You get that surge of like ridiculous fucking sex drive, fucking everything. And that sort of wanes though. It doesn't maintain this like hyper aggressiveness throughout the entirety of, TRT or a testosterone cycle. You sort of have this like giant uptick where everything goes like hyper aggressive for like, I don't know, a couple months. And then after that, it sort of wanes off. And this is like, regardless of the dose, you don't just stay like hyper like puberty state the entire time. At least I didn't personally. And I feel like most people, they get that like, literally feels like you hit puberty the first like 5 weeks. And then after that, it sort of like becomes a bit more like you sort of acclimate to it. It becomes your new homeostasis, and it doesn't feel as like hyper, adrenergic. It doesn't feel as hyper sexual. It just feels more like a high normal state. Like the best way I can describe it is literally like, the saying people say, I'm on TRT and my levels are high normal. Like that's almost like what being on TRT actually feels like. It's like you feel high normal. Like all your normal functions are just at a high level. Your neurological efficiency, everything feels a bit sharper. You feel a bit more, if you're going from like, let's just say like, I don't know, 450 nanograms per deciliter to 1,000, like, are you gonna notice nothing even though you were normal before? Like, no, you're gonna notice a bit of a difference in certain neurological processes. Your sex drive is gonna increase probably. Everything that you have that is normal to begin with becomes high normal, just like your level on a piece of paper. A lot of your functions are just enhanced to a higher degree. Now, a lot of this sort of reaches a like homeostatic set point after a while where it just feels normal to you, but it's not necessarily the norm for most individuals. Like most individuals will not operate with this stationary, pulsatile secretion type way of creating testosterone. Like most people have a diurnal rhythm where their testosterone's up and down, whereas guys on TRT, high normal, or even guys on a testosterone cycle, your levels are basically have a slow bleed, and they maintain like steady state concentrations the entire time, pending you're using a long ester or you're pinning frequently enough. So anyway, as far as like the sex drive, the neurological functions, I don't know how driven you are, motivation-wise, stuff like that, it all is just heightened to a higher degree. Like for example, when I did my DECA-only experiment, one of the main things I noticed was like my drive, sort of like my oomph in life, was kind of just like numbed and like diminished. And this was the result of replacing TRT with nandrolone and having no testosterone in my system. And it wasn't like I was non-functional and unable to get myself to do tasks, but I was I had a bit less like drive behind it. And I don't know if I would not be surprised if this plays into why females in general do not have the same like drive to become successful in certain like entrepreneurial areas than men. I'm not saying they're not capable of it. I'm just saying that in general, the majority of men, I feel like the numbers sort of outweigh women in terms of like successful men entrepreneurship wise versus successful women. It's sort of, I think the biology of the hormones literally just like dictates gender roles and kind of like drives you to do certain things that you otherwise, I guess like biology would sort of ancestrally would have driven you to anyways. Like, the caretakers are the ones who are lower androgens, and the ones that have a shit ton of testosterone are meant to go out there and fight and like fend for, the family and fucking, earn and do shit. So I don't know if this sort of like plays into it directly, but it's like I can tell there is a direct correlation between motivation and drive when I am like high T versus doing some fucking experiments with like an alternative HRT compound, or I'm like not, I don't know, like I'm letting my T crash for some reason or whatever. Like I've done a fucking lot of experiments. So, yeah, that's like honestly the broad spectrum enhancement of everything. Like energy systems are upregulated, your motor unit recruitment in the gym is enhanced. You're just like, I don't know, like just everything is sort of like your adrenergic signaling too is like kind of enhanced to a degree that can be problematic because you sort of have sympathetic overdrive to some extent if you are chronically redlined at like 1,000 nanogram per deciliter test level. So it becomes a bit harder to shift into that state of like rest and digest and chill the fuck out. Like you're kind of a little bit more, not like on edge stress wise, like you can be, but I mean, and some people can't handle it. But in addition to that, it sort of just becomes a bit, the more androgens you have doing stuff, the more difficult it is for your brain to chill out. Like let's just put it that way. There's a reason why guys will take a fat dose of anadrol or a fat dose of halotestin before a workout for anadrol or before like powerlifting or some shit for halotestin. There's a reason why AR activation is such a potent driver of literal like anger in some cases and like fucking just absolute like aggression. Like that kind of stuff is driven through androgens, and having a higher amount of androgens in the body, even if it is bioidentical testosterone, thus 5-alpha reducing to DHT, that androgenic component can enhance, sympathetic drive and kind of keep it at a state of almost like over elevated to some extent for some individuals for a higher amount of time than would otherwise be best, I don't know, suited for an individual who's like good at regulating, feeling good, getting to a state of relaxation, and then getting into the sympathetic drive state they need when they're in the gym and then chilling out after. It can be a bit more difficult to do that, but that sort of just plays into the manually maintaining your high androgen status on a daily basis 24 hours a day without letting it sink up and down like a diurnal rhythm. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily, but it almost requires more oversight in a, health aspect, to make sure you're able to facilitate certain processes that otherwise would be physiologically endogenously regulated, but now you're sort of like overstepping like certain processes and like rate limiting factors in the body by like just manually keeping your hormones like artificially elevated the entire time. In addition to that, you sort of intervene significantly with the synthesis of certain neurosteroid cascades, and it can result in, anxiety and certain things like that. So, obviously upstream management of steroidogenesis cascades via exogenous supplementation of certain things that may be necessary, like even progesterone for some individuals on TRT. Certain shit like that may be needed when you are manually shutting down your HPTA. So certain things to keep in mind, but in general, this video is getting a bit on a tangent about like what could go wrong with testosterone. What it actually feels like in general is just like a general enhancement of everything that is male. Your everything driven by estrogen kind of like upregulates. You have a significant increase in libido. Your DHT increases. You have a significant increase in everything I said. Neurological efficiency, fucking sex drive, muscle growth is more of the testosterone driven component. But in general, just overall like masculinity and overall motivation. Not that masculinity and motivation are intertwined directly, but I'm just saying you just have more of a oomph in your life, and that's more what it feels like. You are literally operating on a high normal state perpetually, and this isn't to say you can't get brain fog, you can't get thrown out of a rhythm, you can't be lazy, you can't be procrastinating. There's so many guys who are lazy fucking procrastinators on gear. Like how many bodybuilders are notorious for just like going to the gym, coming home and like yanking it and fucking playing Xbox? That's like, a lot of bodybuilders who do that on a, regular basis. And those individuals though, and those individuals have sky high T levels. Doesn't mean it just, you can still have poor lifestyle practices that will give you like shitty motivation, shitty, brain fog, blah, blah, blah. But testosterone simply will put you more in a baseline state that is compatible with a good lifestyle that will then drive that motivation. Like, it's not a coincidence that guys who have low T just have like, they often feel like no purpose in life. They have like brutal like mood regulation. They often feel like randomly depressed for no reason. Like, there's a reason this shit happens, and largely ties into androgen regulation in men and how it sort of drives essentially everything you do neurologically, physiologically, literally like fucking manual energy output wise, a lot of shit like that. So I feel like I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but at the end of the day, it's not like it differentiates itself significantly from other compounds in some special way. I guess it does though, in the sense that it is broad spectrum, whereas the other ones kind of drive certain attributes in their own way. Like, you know, one from a DHT derivative column might be, you know, more, might enhance mental acuity and like motor unit recruitment to a more significant extent than a traditional, like an androlone, which might drive more of a, kind of like a chilled out, kind of like non-aggro kind of state of apathetic kind of nonchalantness towards life. It's more of a dulled meh about stuff, but it also is designed intentionally that way to reduce the androgenicity of the compound, as well as drive other things in the body, like literally driving a significant amount of volume into the muscles. One of the most volume driving compounds there is. But from a neurological aspect, it's totally different than a lot of the DHT derivatives in terms of how it affects your mindset, in terms of how it affects your acuity, sharpness, reflexes, even shit like this that is driven differently through these different compounds. But with testosterone, because it has that broad spectrum, 5-alpha reducing into however much DHT your body deems appropriate, it aromatizes into how much estrogen in tissues the body deems appropriate. The parent compound testosterone remains as testosterone to whatever degree your body feels appropriate. SHBG regulates the androgenicity of the body between DHT, testosterone, and estrogen, because they each have their own relatively different binding affinity too, and the SHBG determines how much of these compounds get delivered to certain tissues. This is all like a perfect balancing act, and is why testosterone of all the compounds has the most general, like, upregulating feature in the most like general broad spectrum way of all of them. And that is kind of the best way I can put it. It literally takes your normal state of a normal male and makes it high normal. That's, if you have a better description, drop it down there, but that is kind of how I feel about T and kind of how I feel when I'm on it. So that's kind of the best way I can put it, So anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm. They're much appreciated. And if you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, my recommended lab test panels, Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas I designed myself from scratch, and anything else I'm associated with, it's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.